in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, celebrating that he is the most influential man in Hollywood. Disney's CEO Bob Iger talked about a number of different topics. These ranged from how the ongoing streaming wars is changing the industry to personnel having been let go for either tweeting out of turn or otherwise not behaving in line with Disney's values. What many latched onto, though, were the comments Iger made about Star Wars, more specifically about the slowdown in Star Wars output going forward. But by way of implication, Iger said far more than that, and none of it good for either Kathleen Kennedy, Rian Johnson, or Lucasfilm. In this video, we will explore just exactly what Iger said about Star Wars, contrast it to what was said about Marvel, and then see what his comments imply for the future of Star Wars, before finally uncovering the current state of Rian Johnson's trilogy. You may recall that Disney's original plan was to release a new Star Wars movie every year with a new episode and an anthology movie in alternating years. I stress original plan, because it would appear that plan has gone out the window. So there is no misunderstanding here. Let's look at Iger's exact words. The Hollywood Reporter said, "Many believe Disney should pump the brakes and not put out a Star Wars movie each year." To which Iger replied, "I made the timing decision, and as I look back, I think the mistake that I made, I take the blame, was a little too much, too fast. You can expect some slowdown, but that doesn't mean we're not going to make films. J.J. Abrams is busy making Episode 9. We have creative entities, including Game of Thrones creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, who are developing sagas of their own, which we haven't been specific about. And we are just at the point where we're going to start making decisions about what comes next after JJ's. But I think we're going to be a little bit more careful about volume and timing. And the buck stops here on that." In this very carefully planned and worded statement, Iger gets a lot of information across, more so by what was not said. If one is so inclined, one can choose to interpret this as Iger admitting that The Last Jedi's smaller than expected final box office relative to its opening weekend, let alone solo a Star Wars story outright bombing, was simply due to Star Wars overexposure and nothing else. No fingers are pointed, and no names are being thrown under the bus. On the contrary, Iger makes it clear that he himself will take responsibility for the volume and timing of future Star Wars releases. That seems good and well, a professional, nice and comfy, non-confrontational statement, at least at face value. Between the lines, however, the matter may be different. To get a better reading of that, let's compare what Iger said about Star Wars to what he said about Marvel. The Hollywood Reporter asked, "How is Marvel going to absorb Fox's X-Men franchise? Is Kevin Feige going to oversee everything?" To which Iger replied, "I think it only makes sense. I want to be careful here because of what's been communicated to the Fox folks, but I think they know. It only makes sense for Marvel to be supervised by one entity. There shouldn't be two Marvels." The Hollywood Reporter then went on to ask, "So Deadpool could become an Avenger?" To which Iger replied, "Kevin's got a lot of ideas. I'm not suggesting that's one of them, but who knows." In other words, where all things Marvel are concerned, the buck stops at Kevin Feige. What's been communicated to the Fox folks, what Iger thinks they know, is that half of their Marvel department will likely be made redundant, and the other half will jump whenever Feige says so, lest they follow the first half out the door. It is more than likely that, as with Lucasfilm and Star Wars, Disney has demanded a certain output per year from Marvel. But with Marvel, there is no need to even mention that, or to make any other excuses at all, as Kevin Feige's Marvel Studios delivered everything Disney ever asked, and then some. So whenever Marvel comes up, all Iger has to do is refer to Kevin Feige and his plans. That is the goodwill Feige has built through delivering results. Kevin Feige's counterpart at Lucasfilm, the one ultimately in charge of Star Wars, is Kathleen Kennedy. Iger didn't even mention her by a word when speaking about Star Wars. When Disney first bought Marvel, they stated on numerous occasions that they would not interfere with Marvel Studios. Their mantra was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that was their initial approach to Lucasfilm and Star Wars as well. The implication of Iger's comments on Star Wars, especially when contrasted to his comments on Marvel, is that from Disney's point of view, Star Wars is broken, and Disney needs to step in to fix it. Note that when talking about Marvel, Iger refers to them as their own thing, something apart from him, something under the full control of Kevin Feige. By contrast, Iger doesn't mention Kathleen Kennedy, or Lucasfilm for that matter, even once when talking about Star Wars. Given Kennedy's position and responsibility for Star Wars, being left out like that in an interview like this is as remarkable as it is damning. Furthermore, Iger says things like, "We have this and we are doing that," before concluding that the buck stops here, with him, not with Lucasfilm and not with Kathleen Kennedy. We have earlier reported that Iger wanted to get rid of Kennedy, but couldn't, in part because they couldn't find anyone for the job, and in part because they didn't want a high-profile change in management, of a female executive no less, in the middle of the Me Too era, and in the middle of the Fox merger. What this statement from Iger implies is that even if Kennedy may not yet technically be fired, she has effectively been stripped of power over Star Wars and has one foot out the door. This is in line with rumors that are circulating Hollywood. When talking about the future post-Episode 9, Iger made it clear that, quote, "we," so not just Lucasfilm, are going to start making plans about that, and he referenced different entities making Star Wars sagas of their own, highlighting Game of Thrones showrunners Benioff and Weiss. Not highlighted was Rian Johnson's announced Star Wars Trilogy. Sure, that might have been an oversight. He did after all not mention Favreau's Star Wars TV series either. Still, it's somewhat puzzling that he would only mention one out of a grand total of 2 new movie sagas. There has been heavy speculation that the plug has been pulled on Johnson's Star Wars trilogy, so much so, Rian Johnson took to Twitter to confirm he was still making it. That confirmation alone doesn't mean much though. Keep in mind, Ben Affleck confirmed he was directing Batman 2 several times over, right up until the moment he dropped out. So, what is really going on with Rian Johnson and his Star Wars trilogy? Before we get to the current state of affairs, let's jump back in time 1 year. Back then, The Force Awakens was an absolute smash hit. Rogue One had delivered the goods as well, and The Last Jedi was possibly the most anticipated movie of the year. Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson had a great time working together on it, and because of that, they decided to make another trilogy, despite Johnson never even having pitched a story for it. Alan Horn and Bob Iger had no issues with it, because at the time, everything was awesome in the realm of Star Wars and the future looked bright. Prior to and during its release, all the powers that be at Disney loved The Last Jedi and thought it was a masterpiece, made by visionary filmmakers. But by the time The Last Jedi left theaters, and certainly by the time Solo's opening weekend numbers came in, those same powers that be had decidedly fallen out of love with both the movie and the creatives behind it. As the backlash grew more and more fierce, Disney slammed the brakes on all Star Wars spin-off projects for a rethink and re-evaluation. Some of the projects will eventually move back into production and get made, while others will quietly disappear into oblivion and never be heard from again. That is the fate which most likely awaits Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy. What I'm hearing from people with knowledge about the situation is that while not yet officially dead, it might as well be, because before Iger will greenlight it, Rian Johnson will have to deliver a script Iger considers so mind-blowingly good that he thinks it will win back all the naysayers who are now boycotting Star Wars because of Rian Johnson's previous Star Wars movie. Iger is very well aware that no other Star Wars movie will be met with as much resistance as another one involving Rian Johnson, so that is going to be a very hard sell. So, what do you make of Iger's comments? And do you think we will ever see Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy? And would you want to? Let me know in the comments.
If you like this video, then please click the subscribe button. And don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified for all the latest uploaded content. Due to recent changes to YouTube's monetization policies, we'd also like to ask you to please consider supporting Midnight's Edge and its sister channel Midnight's Edge After Dark through Patreon. As thanks for their support, patrons will receive early notifications of mini-documentaries, special behind-the-scenes making of the Edge videos, bloopers, outtakes, lost episodes, and more. You can support the channel for as little as $1 a month. Be sure to check back for news and analysis on the corporate politics behind your favorite genre movies, as well as updates and discussion here at Midnight's Edge.